How do we change the unsustainable trajectory that the Northern Territory is on, both economically and socially? We must both diversify the Territory economy as a whole and provide real support for the development of an economy on Indigenous held lands. We cannot continue to think of Aboriginal land as a second or different or lesser territory. Improving outcomes for remote Indigenous people will provide better outcomes for the entire territory, for all Territorians. A seismic shift is needed. There must be substantial increase in economic activity off the Stuart Highway, particularly in Aboriginal land trusts. The Northern Territory is an inherently Indigenous place. The economy already relies on Indigenous land through tourism, mining, pastoral production and many other industries. To increase the economic sustainability of the Northern Territory, we must redouble our efforts to include Indigenous land and labour in the participatory economy. Systematic economic exclusion of Indigenous people in the Northern Territory has resulted in less economic activity and substantially less growth. It is an imperative to diversify the economy to reduce reliance on single industries and major projects. The view that the Northern Territory is somewhat of a blank canvas, waiting for the next big project, is part of the problem, not part of the solution. We don't need to change the entire system that currently exists. We just need to add some incentives to change how people think about risk and opportunity. The good news is that there is some economic activity on Indigenous land already. This activity is driving great interest amongst Aboriginal people about future diversification and sustainable development. Aboriginal people really want to strengthen their own enterprises and in turn their own futures. Many Aboriginal people want to generate the revenue necessary to support their remote communities. They no longer want to rely on government subsidies. While there is moral and legal obligation for the government to continue to support Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory, a diversification of the remote economies will value add that investment. There is also a movement within wider Australia towards practical reconciliation, not just exploitation. There are some barriers to overcome, but with a few incentives, we may be able to change the current thinking away from viewing short-term risk and looking at long-term opportunity. I'm not proposing all the answers here, just that we need to start discussing the right questions. To move the debate beyond the echo chamber, we have proposed a series of symposia commencing later this year in Alice Springs. The first of which will look at the potential of taxation incentives to drive greater economic activity on Indigenous land. The costs are too great to not make a change. We must take measures to increase economic opportunity for Indigenous Australians who choose to live on their ancestral lands, to continue their cultural practices, to speak their first language.
Man alam kaya ko lang ngula jul bal nyina la uri ba.
Uri ba bal ngal ngai
Uri ngal bal ngal ba.
Ngal ba yanga.
Nyol mangul heja wala ngi nyana ko.
Nyambul ngo nyula ngol bol je nyambul.
Yo ko jara.
Nyulu la ngo.